Good morning, Year 4, and this is your fourth audio session focusing on Secrets of a Sun King. Today, we're going to be looking at creating a character profile. So, you'll be looking to draw out details about a specific character to answer a few questions and give some evidence to support your answers, building on the comprehension skills that we've been looking at over the last few weeks. Last week, we looked at the 5 W's and how, and those are who, what, when, where, why, and how. And I've included the same slide as last week just to give you a brief bit of detail about each of those words so that you can sort of recap exactly what we learned about them. If you want to do a little bit more work on that, please feel free to go back to last week's video where there's a little bit more in-depth discussion about those words. Today's section is a fairly long one again, but a really important part of the text, and it sort of will shed a lot of light on a few things that we've discovered so far, and it will give us a bit more information about them. So I'm going to move on. Today we're looking at giving a character profile and giving some evidence to support our opinions, but I thought we'd do a little bit of time based on what evidence actually is. We often ask you to support your answers with evidence, and this is a really important skill that you're going to need to use throughout the rest of your school lives and beyond. What is evidence? It's first and foremost, it's a way of backing up what you state as an opinion or what you are saying as a fact. Anything you give as an answer, you need to be able to back it up. And evidence from the text in specific terms would be something that you've drawn out that you think backs up what you are saying about a particular text. So even if you say you like something, you need to be able to say, I like this because in the text it says this is something that I like. So just as an example, an example of opening your sort of answer to this type of question or this type of activity, I think this book is mysterious or very mysterious. I think this because in the text it says, and then you would give your quote or your sort of phrase from the text to back that up. Then you've given it a bit of an explanation afterwards to explain why that is the case. That is all we mean. You take those words from the text that have given you this impression or given you this feeling, and you use that within your answer to back up what you're saying. That's something you're going to need to do in today's task at the very end, once I explain everything. Without spending too much more time on this, again, you can rewind this and listen to it again. Without spending too much time, let's move on to chapter 5 of Secrets of a Sun King. That night at the supper table, I told a lie. Easier than the last one, I said, when Dad asked how the spelling test had gone today at school. He caught me off guard. I was so busy thinking about hotels and Professor Hanawati, I'd forgotten the day I should have had. Go on then, tell me, what was the hardest word in the test? Dad asked. I said the first thing that came in my head. Reincarnation. Did you get full marks? No. Which words did you get wrong? Because they're the ones you ought to be practicing, you know. It was typical Dad, wanting me to be cleverer, faster, better, and I did try, but tonight it was exhausting. I got up from the table and started clearing the dishes. Lillian, he said sharply, I'm talking to you. Oh, leave her be. She's worried about her granddad, Mum chided. I was, in ways they couldn't imagine. Well, she'd better not be slipping behind. I'll be on to her teachers if she is. Dad shook out the paper. Once he'd disappeared behind it, Mum leaned towards me, whispering, I'm proud of you, Lil. You've got your granddad's spirit, far more than I ever did. There's more to the world than spelling tests, he'd say, and he's right. Dear Mum, she was trying to be kind, but it felt like a nudge in the ribs, reminding me of my promise to Grandad. I smiled stiffly. I couldn't tell her about the jar or the curse, could I? I wasn't even meant to have gone to the hospital in the first place. Times like this, I wondered what it would be like to have someone my age to talk to share private, secret stuff that wasn't for grown-ups' ears, like Tulip did, I bet, with her 2 brothers, the lucky devil. After supper was cleared and a pot of tea made, Mum and Dad settled by the stove. Every evening it was the same. We'd sit quietly, rarely speaking, though often I'd glance up and notice how sad they looked. Dad, I suppose, might be thinking about the war. As for Mum, I didn't know. Sometimes she'd have tears in her eyes. Other times she'd rest a hand on her stomach and sigh. Tonight, though, I couldn't sit quietly, not with Professor Hanawati's letter at Grandad's just waiting to be read. Has Nefertiti been fed yet? I asked. I'll go if you like. I knew full well how hard it was to coax my parents out of their chairs once they'd settled down. and it was just the sort of little job they'd count on me to do. Good girl, Mum said. Don't be long. A short time later, I was heading down Grandad's side alley. This time I brought a torch, but still felt wary as I turned the corner. On the doorstep were 2 bottles of milk and 1 of cream, and Nefertiti crouched between them. The second she saw me, she stood up purring. Glad to see you're happier tonight, miss, I said, crouching down to scratch her chin. She was probably hungry, I supposed, but when the door unlocked easily enough, I began to wonder if something was already shifting. Now I knew about the curse and what I had to do to break it. Maybe it was a sign I was on the right track. It felt odd to go inside, with no Grandad there to greet me. The hallway was so familiar, the crooked lampshade he'd never bothered to straighten, the coat stand, the stairs, the passageway leading to the shop. It made me become overall upset. Though being in the shop itself felt better, a comfort even. The room was so full of Grandad. It was like he was here with me. The shelves on every wall were crammed with books, plates, carvings, more boxes. Even the alarming bits, the strange face masks, the stuffed animals with glass bead eyes, were all reasons why I loved coming to visit. In the bay window was Grandad's desk, messy as ever. I flicked through coal bills, newspaper clippings, a fair few, which I noticed were to do with Egypt, and more specifically Mr. Carter. Moving a heap of notebooks aside, I found a half-eaten corned beef sandwich. A quick sniff confirmed it had been there for a long time, longer than Grandad had been sick. He was like me where food was concerned. It'd take something really shocking to put him off what he was eating. What looked to be Dr. Hanawati's letter was underneath the sandwich. It wasn't a short one either, but a good 5 or 6 pages long and covered in stale breadcrumbs. The paper was tissue thin and a lovely, unusual blue colour. I scanned it for a signature, which, oddly, was at the bottom of the very first page. Like most people's, it was a squiggle, but I was able to recognise the H at the start of the name and the T at the end to know this was what I was looking for. I sat down in the nearest chair. It felt strange to be about to read a dead man's letter, a bit eerie, a bit sad, but I was intrigued to hear what he had to say. Dear Ezra, it began. You will know how hard it is for me to admit to being wrong, but I must tell you your instincts regarding the Egyptian canopic jars were right all along. It does, I fear, carry a terrible curse. We should have left it in Egypt where it belongs. The death of a young boy just days after he discovered it in that queer little rock-faced tomb was no accident, nor should we have argued and fought over the jar. We were good chums, Ezra, but we let the jar breed bad feeling between us. It poisoned our friendship, I'm sad to say. Many years ago, you told me never to darken your door again, and I respected your wish. Now I find I must communicate with you. I have important, terrible news. Neither of us knew there was anything inside the jar, did we? Yet recently, I've discovered it holds a secret. Let me explain. For years, the jar stayed packed away in my attic, all but forgotten. Last month, something changed. For some unknown reason, the jar began to play on my mind, and when I retrieved it from the attic, I heard a rattling sound, indicating an object was inside. It struck me as strange that neither you nor I had heard such a sound when we brought the jar home all that time ago, in such unhappy circumstances. On removing the lid, which took considerable effort, I found a papyrus scroll rolled up tightly, folded, and tied with a leather thong. There was also something stuffed in the base of the jar, a scrap of old linen, probably, that I couldn't dislodge. It was the scroll that captivated my interest, and so I set about trying to translate it. The writing was hard to decipher. It wasn't the hieroglyphs I would have expected to see in an important document, but the informal demotic Egyptian of a personal account. I spent hours, days at my desk, poring over this discovery. As finds go, it was almost as exciting as our first sighting of the jar itself. Remember that, Ezra? How we swooned when we saw it on the market stall. We could not believe Mr. Carter had dismissed it as an insignificant piece. How stupid he would feel now if he could read this translation. When you see whose name appears at the very start of the account, you will understand my elation. Yet I have to warn you, my excitement was short-lived. On commencing the translation, I was overcome with a terrible feeling of dread. I can't describe it more eloquently than that. These past couple of weeks, I've suffered nightmares, headaches, fevers. The doctor says it's all a nervous exhaustion, but I know it is something more sinister, Ezra, something linked to the jar. Of course, no one believes me. My own dear wife looks at me across the dinner table each night as if I were insane. I assure you I am not. The jar is back in its box. I cannot bear to look at it or even have it in my study with me any more. Every day I live in fear of some nameless terror. The curse is upon me. Much more of this, and I will have to rid myself of the jar for my safety and well-being. Perhaps I might return it to you, who always understood its power better than me. Meanwhile, I send you what I have of what the scroll I have translated so far. There is more to come, but my progress is proving slower with what remains. You'll be interested to read it. I know and can, I hope, be of help. Your old friend, Salim Hanawati. I sat with my head in my hands. The letter was a lot to digest. How uncanny that Professor Hanawati had guessed something awful was going to happen to him. It made me more scared for Grandad too, because the letter confirmed that the curse really did exist. So I, after all these years, had it started up again. And what was wrapped in linen in the bottom of the jar? There was no mention of the hotel Grandad spoke about either. The remaining sheets of paper in my hand were the translation, I guessed. Grandad was right. The writing was tiny and cramped, so much so I had to move closer to the lamp to read it properly. Thebes, Ancient Egypt, March 1323 BC. I, Lysandra, have been trusted to scribe the final days of our king Tutankhamun. Be warned, this is not the official account. Mine is about the boy who didn't want to be pharaoh, who was at his happiest pelting my brother with pomegranates. I stopped, reading the first lines again. This was about Tutankhamun, the Tutankhamun, who Howard Carter was so desperate to find, whose name was in the news almost every day now. Just in case I got it wrong, I held the paper directly underneath the light. No, the name was there all right, though I couldn't believe what I was reading. There's a saying amongst our people, let your face shine, because no one wants to live an unhappy life here on earth and then be stuck with it forever in the afterlife. So when I see Kaiki limping towards our house with a face like an old goat's, I sense trouble on the way. Shall I call Maya? I ask him. Maya is my older brother and Kaiki's dearest friend. Only a short stretch of courtyard separates our house from the steps to the royal palace where Kaiki lives. That's not his proper name. Maya made it up when he was little. He's been Kaiki to our family ever since. My brother is taller than any of us nowadays. He has long legs as thin as a stalk's, but is strong and healthy and happy. All the things Kaiki isn't. But Kaiki is also King Tutankhamun of Egypt. Often I think he hates this role. It weighs him down, bores him. He'd rather idle his days away with Maya, climbing trees, hunting rodents. Neither has yet seen 17 summers. They are still young and prone to silliness. Our mother pretends not to see it, but I know she doesn't approve. She sews and tuts, which will be her lot for eternity if she's not careful. Kaiki leans on his walking stick, a little out of breath. Call him in a moment, Lysandra, he replies. First, I need to talk to you. This takes me by surprise. When people visit me, they come to share their dreams. My grandfather was the first in our family with a gift for dream reading. Now the honour has been passed to me. A person's dreams tell you their hopes and fears, the road they will follow onto the afterlife. The skill is to listen, to hold each part of what they say in your hands. A dream is like a melon, I tell people. It's not until you cut open the skin that you find the sweet truth inside. As I'm only young, 4 summers behind my brother, I'm still learning the skill. I'm quieter than him too. A watcher, my mother calls me. She says it's why the gift came to me. Today, Kaiki looks pale. I hope we're not in for another bout of illness. The fever leaves him weaker every time, and I know I'm not alone in noticing it. There are those at the palace who watch Kaiki. Every limp, every sweat, every meal left untouched. No one watches more than his godfather, I, whom Kaiki leans on like a son to a wise father. He does little without I's approval, and in my view spends far too much time seeking it. I don't trust I. He has the eyes of a hungry wolf watching a weakening lamb. Come inside, I said to Kaiki. There's no sun. The wind of the river is too brisk for sitting outside. So Kaiki follows me in to where the stove is hot because my mother is baking. She sees us coming, bows and scuttles off, tucking the basket of already baked bread under her arm. Please sit, I say, gesturing to the cushions on the floor. Kaiki shakes his head. He's glancing nervously towards the doorway, expecting Maya to appear. I don't sit either. Bad dreams? Terrible dreams, he hisses. For the last few nights it's been the same. I'm chasing someone, and though I run and run, I can't reach them. There's a fresh insect bite on his left cheek. He should have had a net covering his face. I wonder why his servant, whose job it is to tend to these things, isn't being more careful. The fevers that come with such a bite are dangerous. So too are the coughs that plague him every winter. Are you sick? I ask, because this sounds like a fever dream. I hear plenty of them, and they usually mean very little. No, Lysandra, for once I'm not. I'm more interested now. And how does it end, this dream of yours? I reach a dead end, a wall, a locked door, a ravine. It changes every time. He shivers slightly. Behind me, I hear animals growling, Scorpions run across my feet. I mull over what he's told me, a coldness in my veins. I need to hear more of this dream. The person you're chasing, do you see them? I ask. I don't get a good look. He stops, startled as Maya strides into the room. My brother, wrapped in a blanket against the chill, looks more bony-limbed than ever. Not trying to charm my sister, are you? He asks, giving Kaiki a playful nudge. He's being ridiculous. Kaiki is a wife. Queen Ankhesenamun, chosen for him by the men of his inner circle. She's very beautiful, with amber eyes and trailing black hair, though she's almost as old as our mother, which people say is why her babies don't tend to live. Go and jump in the river, I tell Maya, scowling. My brother grins. That's an idea. Coming, Kaiki? Once they've gone to get up to whatever mischief takes their fancy, I let out the long, worried breath I'd been holding in. This dream of Kaiki's troubles me. The sun stays hidden for days on end. Everything is cold. The ground we walk on, the water we bathe in, the linen we wear. Kaiki's father was a wayward pharaoh who had favourites among the gods. It brought chaos to our country, and people are saying the god Amun is still offended, which is why the sun refuses to shine. I've never known a winter so miserable or so dark, Mother says. She keeps our oil lamps lit all day so she can see well enough to sow. I'm struggling to concentrate on my scribing work. All morning I make mistakes on the papyrus. Mother scolds me. Whatever's the matter, Lysandra, come sit closer to the light. But my mind keeps wandering back to Kaiki's dream. A dead end means something, or someone is blocking his journey through this life and onto the next. It's a bad omen. So too are the scorpions, which conjure up all things poisonous. I can't explain to Mother that the darkness isn't in the room but in my head. We're saved by Maya, who rushes in from outside, bringing the cold air with him. I have news, he says. The king's decided to hold a feast day for Amun tomorrow to win back his favour. Aya's decided it, you mean, I mutter. Yet despite my mood, I'm glad I've missed the sun. What can we do to help? Mother asks, ever practical. Your flatbread, Mother. Kaiki's requesting it. Maya turns to me. You can help Roti with the horses. There's going to be a chariot racing. For once, Kaiki's dear godfather is letting him have his way. Chariot racing is one of Kaiki's favourite sports. It's also dangerous, noisy, smelly, and both thrilling and terrifying to watch. He's not taking part, is he? I ask. The thought makes me anxious. Maya laughs. Don't look so worried. It's a feast day, not a funeral. I pray my joyful brother is right. So that's the end of chapter 5, which coincidentally with this book is the end of part 1. So next time we'll move on to part 2 of this particular book. Today, your task on the literacy template, which is on later. Once you've listened to the audio reading, which we've just gone through, please complete the tasks on the template. We'd like you to select a character from the book, and it can be any character. And now I think it's a particularly good moment to do this because at the end of that chapter, we've been introduced to a couple of other characters as well. So that should give you a good choice to make for who is going to be your particular character. We'd like you to describe their appearance. And when you do so, we'd like you to take evidence from the text and quotations to support your descriptions. So if, for example, you choose a character and it states that they're tall, you must select a line from the text to go next to it that backs that statement up, and so on with all of the other physical characteristics. The second part, what do we know about their personality? It's the same process again, but you're looking for things about their personality, their character, how they act. And again, we're backing that up with evidence to support. The final aspect, predict what you think will happen to them in the rest of the story. And again, this is still using evidence, but it's now using your predictive skills and your understanding of the text so far to make an educated guess as to what's going to happen. But you need to be using those quotations to support all of your answers here. And all of this is on the literacy template. So like I said previously, go back through this section, listen to certain parts. You might not want to listen to the whole section, but you might want to listen to that final bit where we get the introduction of a young Tutankhamun as Pharaoh. You may want to choose to do him as your character. You may want to choose Lil, as we've learned a little bit more about her. It's completely up to you, but what I suggest is where you think we've heard most about a particular character, go back and listen to that particular audio session again, or this one, just so that you can get a bit more evidence to include on your sheet. And again, this is quite a long video, so maybe have a break just after you've done this and then come back to doing the work. If you have any questions, please ask your class teachers in your sessions. And other than that, I hope you have a good day.